Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a list for all of you piano mavens, and those of you who really ought to be, which is the rest of us, 21 sets of piano etudes. Now, for those of you who aren't in the know, an etude means study in French, and the etude is a specific little form of art, or it became one in the Romantic period. In the Baroque period, for example, there was no real difference between the idea of study and creating art. Bach's greatest collection of keyboard works, he simply called Klavierübung, piano practice, and it included everything, organ music and piano music, and his partitas and some of his most magnificent large works. The Goldberg variations and the well-tempered clavier and the 2- and 3-part inventions all could have fallen under the category of etude, had Bach wanted to call them that, or lessons. Piano sonatas back in the day were often called lessons or exercises. Scarlatti's sonatas were published as exercises. The idea was to combine the development of technique with the highest form of artistic expression. And that's exactly what those composers did. But they didn't necessarily isolate individual characteristics of technique and exploit them one work at a time systematically, as, for example, happened in later works in the Romantic period, starting with good old Czerny with his millions of exercises and things like that. Those people who did those books of goodies that tortured piano students and have tortured them ever since. But in the Romantic period, we began to get a series of works which exploited individual features of piano technique. For example, playing arpeggios in opposite directions in different hands, or scales, or passages in thirds and sixths, or leaps, or hand crossings, or things like that. And they were going to do it in a way which developed those techniques one little piece at a time. And the guy who did that more than anybody was Chopin. Tovey said that Chopin's etudes were the single example of the highest art and the individual exploitation of aspects of technique. But, of course, millions of composers wrote etudes, and I think etudes are fascinating. Just as a group, as a bunch, as a theory, as an aesthetic proposition, because the tension between the technical and the expressive is extremely evident, and in wonderful, generally short, not always, short works that are they're just wonderful to savor individually. Let's just put it that way. And it's fun to hear what they do and how they do it, using the idea of technical practice at the keyboard. It's just a wonderful group of pieces. And I got 21 of these suckers, and they run the gamut. And I'm just going to go through them. You can just look at the list. You could stop watching me now and just look at the list. But I'm going to talk about some of them as we go down the list. I'm not going to make this an exordium, an endless exordium of piano technique, because I think that would be excruciatingly dull when you could be listening to this music, which is not excruciatingly dull. So we begin with Hummel, the 24 Grand Etudes, Opus 125. Now, Hummel was the post-Mozartian antecedent to Chopin. And his Grand Etudes are really the predecessors, I think, to Chopin's Etudes, because his development of piano technique was extraordinary, and it doesn't get a lot of play. Most people don't pay much attention to Hummel, but he was an amazing keyboard artist. And, one of the things that in the history of keyboard pedagogy and also the history of piano music is that there are two sort of schools. And they don't get equal attention, and they don't get equal respect. There was the Beethoven sonata, heavy-duty, large-form piano music guy school, which people actually wrongly claim is in the path of, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, the 3 Bs. But that's actually not the piano school that constituted the majority of what piano music was doing. Hummel was the majority of what piano music was doing. That is, developing the technique, using the new, larger, more sonorous pianos to develop a whole new school of piano technique. Beethoven was a whole new school of piano composition, which is a different thing. So the Hummel virtuoso school sort of starts there, and the Hummel Grand Etudes are a great place to begin. After that, you get Chopin, and Chopin's etudes are so well known, I don't even have to talk about them much. There are two sets, Opus 10 and Opus 25, and then Trois Nouvelles Etudes, three little ones he wrote later. They are extraordinarily beautiful miniatures, every one of which is a little masterpiece, both of melody and expressive depth, as well as an isolated characteristic of piano technique. And they are absolutely fabulous. And after Chopin, we've got Schumann, his symphonic etudes. Now, what is a symphonic etude? I have no idea. Listening to Schumann doesn't tell you anything. But they are, in a sense, less concerned with, shall we say, individual aspects of technique a la Chopin, and more concerned with larger scale composition. That is, grouping them into larger sets or exploiting similar techniques over a number of works. They tend to get bigger and operate in larger chunks. But that's a very loose definition, and I'm not pushing it any further than that. Then we have the Liszt Transcendental Etudes. Now, these, of course, have been trashed by everybody because they are programmatic. Most of them have stories attached to them, like Mazeppa, the Cossack who gets dragged behind a horse and survives and eventually conquers his draggers. But also, they are so focused on the development of extraordinary virtuosity that people dismiss extraordinary virtuosity. I have no idea why they call it empty virtuosity. It's empty because it's virtuosic. Oh, it's such bullshit. It's such snobbery. It's nonsense. Anyway, they're great pieces. There are 12 of them. They're big pieces, much larger than Chopin's etudes, work by work. And they are really little symphonic poems for the piano that are impossibly difficult to play. And that's what makes them etudes. Difficulty equals etude. Now, some people think that's a lower definition of what an etude is, but I don't care. I really don't care. All I care is what the music sounds like. And if it sounds great and he calls it an etude, it's an etude. It's fine by me. Next, we get the Brahms Paganini variations. Now, we know the tune. Da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum. It's based on the last of Paganini's violin caprices, which everybody's used as a theme for variations, including Rachmaninoff and Ludoslavsky, and oh my goodness, just everybody. Brahms Paganini variations occur in two books, and they are, in fact, variations, and each variation is an etude. They are extraordinarily virtuosic and difficult works, and for that reason, rather seldom played. And seldom played complete because it's really questionable how well they work as an entity. As variations, of course, they're wonderful, but they don't hang together the way Brahms's variation sets usually do, possibly because of the etude character, but the music's wonderful. And as long as you're not expecting something symphonic, like the symphonic etudes of Schumann, then you're in great shape. So after Brahms, Lyapunov. Let's do someone else. The Russian Lyapunov, not a major composer, but a fun composer. And, his most famous work is called Hashish. So, what do we expect? But he also did a series of transcendental etudes, obviously based on Liszt's transcendental etudes. They're a little bit more romantically modern and upscale, perhaps, you might call them, but they're lots and lots of fun. So give him a shot for sure. Edward MacDowell, the American composer, who I generally find rather tedious. He was an okay, pupil of Liszt, conservative German. I don't find him to be all that interesting, but he did write two very fine sets of piano etudes. He was a pianist, a wonderful composer for the piano, actually. He's known for his concerti and for his solo piano works. And there are two sets of etudes, Opus 39 and Opus 46, that are well worth checking out. Saint-Saëns, another friend of Liszt. Now, Saint-Saëns was nothing if not didactic, and he wrote wonderful etudes. They are wonderful pieces. Piers Lane, I think, did the whole set for Hyperion, and several other pianists have started to look into them because they are great, great works. There are 3 sets of Etudes, Opus 52, Opus 111, and Opus 135. It sounds very dry, but the music is so much fun. Oh my goodness, it's fun. But all alone in the universe of etudism is Alkan, Charles Valentin Alkan. Oh my goodness. These are etudes only in the loosest sense. They are unbelievably virtuosic and difficult, but they are also unbelievably symphonic. His etudes in all the major keys are a smaller set of etudes that go through, like Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, all the major keys and minor keys too, because the next set, Opus 39, the etudes in all the minor keys, that is a big set of works. It includes a symphony for solo piano of 4 of the etudes, a concerto for solo piano of 3 of the etudes, and the concerto for solo piano has a first movement that's half an hour long. So we're not talking about little chunky things. And here the idea of the etude is to impersonate the orchestra and the solo piano simultaneously at one piano. I mean, the idea of etude has here expanded. At the same time, by the way, that the idea of the etude that Chopin was working at was also being sort of codified, but they went in 2 opposite directions. And the Alkan etudes are amazing, and they have been the source of enormous inspiration for piano virtuosi in the 20th century, because they weren't really discovered until a few decades ago. They weren't well known at all, but they are amazing works, and they deserve the widest dissemination as major keyboard works. As etudes in the strict sense, nah. But we don't do anything here in the strict sense. We do things in the musical sense. And that's much more interesting than the strict sense. After that, Scriabin wrote a bunch of etudes, and they're lots of fun. And, if you think that Scriabin's later stuff is kind of like spacey and out there, then his etudes are a lot easier to take because they're squarely in the style and in the tradition of Chopin's etudes. Now, Rachmaninoff wrote a wonderful series of works called Etudes-Tableaux, and the tableau part gives you a clue. I mean, tableau, they're paintings, they're illustrations of something, and they are, so they're not etudes in the strict formal technical sense. They are very, very difficult. And Rachmaninoff was left-handed, and he had huge hands. He could reach like a 50th on his left hand alone. He could cover the whole keyboard. He probably had like suckers on the ends of his fingers too. It was amazing. And the etude tableaux are quite lovely, and some of them have been orchestrated because they're so beautiful by Respighi. They're very, very well known. They're probably Rachmaninoff's best known piano works after the preludes, and they are lovely, lovely works. Big works also. Szymanowski, the Polish composer, is Etudes Opus 33. They are grossly chromatic updates of Chopin's etudes. I mean, they're in a more modern style, but they're also voluptuous. And like everything Szymanowski wrote was kind of like rich and decadent until he discovered folk music. Then he became more rhythmic and perky. But they're beautiful, beautiful, Chopin-esque etudes. Because remember, Chopin was Polish. And so the whole Polish school of romantic pianism, was based on what Chopin achieved, including his etudes. And most composers wrote some. They enjoyed writing etudes after Chopin's example. And the Szymanowskis are another batch of those. Then we've got Debussy's etudes, one of his last works in any kind. They are squarely in the Chopin tradition. Each one is about a technical aspect of playing, but they are also truly high art, remarkable, remarkable works, and not at all fuzzy and impressionistic. They're hard-edged and glittery and harmonically acerbic quite often, and full of humor, and they're just expressively wonderful, great, great pieces, but also a little enigmatic. Late works of a great master who was interested only in where his own art was taking him. And the Debussy etudes are legendary for that, in that sense. They really are just amazing works. Then we've got Leopold Godowsky, his studies on Chopin etudes. These are nuts. These are absolutely nuts. He takes Chopin's etudes and does all kinds of things, like plays two of them simultaneously and expands them grossly and does all kinds of odd harmonic things. They are amazing pieces. And the definitive so far recording is Marc-André Hamelin on Hyperion, which is one of the great records of anything ever recorded. These pieces were honored in the breach. They were considered to be eccentric and sort of unplayable and artistically questionable and all that. And what Hamelin proved is that all of that was true, and we are so happy that he did. They're wonderful. Then Messiaen, Quatre Etudes de rythme, 4 rhythmic etudes. Now, Messiaen sort of, billed himself as a harmonist and rhythmicien, rhythmographer. That's what he was. His music is based on complex Hindu-inspired rhythm, and these pieces are based on their rhythmic studies. Quite simply, as simple as that. And they're wonderful, and they're fun because they're rhythmic, The rhythms aren't exactly, the usual boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, chicka, boom, chicka. No. They're more like boom, chicka, boom, boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, boom, chick, boom, boom, chicka, 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 boom, boom. They're a little more complicated than that, but they're very, very interesting works. Then we have Philip Glass. Oh, he wrote tons of etudes. He wrote, not tons of them, but he wrote a big pile of them. Philip Glass, people just get upset about Philip Glass. I don't know why. He's a very serious composer. He has his own style. Some people cringe at the idea of minimalism. Some people say, oh, they're nothing but Nathalie Boulanger's harmony exercises, because he was one of Nadia Boulanger, the great pedagogue's last pupils. Everybody went to France to study with her. And I don't know what to tell you. They're very listenable. They're enjoyable. They do what etudes are supposed to do. And one of the things that we learn in the more modern conception of etude is that rather than being abstract examples of piano technique, they are more examples of a composer's individual language, as the Messiaen etudes are. And the Glass etudes are more like that. They're aspects of his own technique and his own personal mode of expression. And they're just beautiful for that reason. Absolutely wonderful. So after Glass, we have Nikolai Kapustin, yay, who's just being rediscovered, the great Russian/jazz guy. And he wrote 8 concert etudes. They're in the jazz style, like most of his music is, and they are fantastically virtuosic and fun to listen to. Just incredibly fun. William Bolcom, the American composer, wrote 12 new etudes for piano. And Bolcom is another one of those eclectic American masters. His music is just fabulously good fun, and it adheres to no particular school. It's all just the joy of music making and the joy of virtuosity, and he writes tunes sometimes and sometimes not. And they're just so much fun to listen to because they're constantly fresh and surprising. Marc-André Hamelin, the great 20th century keyboard virtuoso, is also a composer in the great tradition of keyboard virtuosi, and he wrote 12 etudes in all the minor keys, obviously inspired by Mr. Alkan, of whom he is probably today's prime exponent. And so his own etudes are definitely worth listening to. However, the great set of 20th century etudes probably is Ligeti. The Ligeti etudes are to modern piano technique what Chopin's were to romantic technique. They are virtuoso to the nth degree and in just an expansion of the language of piano composition, piano playing, piano technique. Most serious major virtuosi attempt them. They are fabulously fun to listen to, and you're not going to believe what you're going to hear, what these people have to do to play these works. Oh my goodness, they're extraordinary. But that's just a quick list. 21 sets of piano etudes for you to enjoy, and I really hope that you'll dig into them and have some fun with them. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.